Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar from the Yorkshire Rewilding Network. I'm Jeff Davitt, one of the trustees of the network. Those that have joined these webinars before might have expected to see my colleague John Hartshorn. John can't be with us this evening, but should be back for the next webinar next month. It's great to see so many joining this. We're well over 120 already. Looking through the list of names that are registered, it's great to see so many familiar ones and lots of new names. So you're all welcome. Do feel free to add to the chat where you're joining us from and any greetings you'd like to put there. We've had many of these YRN webinars now over the last few winters. Recordings of most of them are on our website on the resources page, along with lots of other useful stuff there if you'd like a look. But it's fair to say I'm more excited for this webinar than any of the others. I'm totally awestruck by golden eagles. I'm not quite sure why. I just find them completely majestic and something symbolic of the wild about them. So I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Cat Barlow, who for more than the last 5 years has been the project manager at the South of Scotland Golden Eagle project. And he's just taking up her role as the CEO of a new successor charity, Restoring Upland Nature. Cat's an ecologist and ornithologist with over 25 years of experience in raptor conservation, the uplands, and importantly, conflict resolution. I've asked Cat to leave time after her talk for questions, so please add those to the Q&A, which I can keep track on more easily than the chat. My wife Debbie is keeping an eye on the chat and will point you in the right direction if there's anything that I need to be aware of there. So you're not here to listen to me, so I'll hand over and say, Cat, please tell us about the birds.
Good evening, everyone. Right, so I will get my screen sharing if I can. Here we go. Okay, hopefully that is showing for you all now. I've got perfect, a couple of videos
Kat. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I've got a couple of videos to show this evening, so I'm hoping that they will all behave themselves and show for you this evening. But we'll get started and see how we go. So good evening. Yes, I'm speaking to you this evening about the South of Scotland Golden Eagle project and what hopefully could be coming in the next few years and seeing golden eagles down into northern England as well. Let's see if I can persuade my computer to cooperate. There we go. So the South of Scotland Golden Eagle project is a partnership project made up of conservation and land management kind of partners. Some of you'll be very familiar with, so RSPB you'll probably know. Nature Scot is our Scottish equivalent of Natural England. Scottish Land and Estates is a representative of, strangely enough, Scottish landowners and estates. And Scottish Forestry, kind of commercial forestry aspect. We've been housed by a charity called the Southern Uplands Partnership for the last 7 years, who've been a wonderful host to us and helped us on our way to our new charity. In the last year, the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust has joined us as a partner as well, and they've been really helpful in bringing in other kind of shooting interests into the partnership. So very briefly, if I can get my buttons to work. So our main funder over the last kind of 6 years, 7 years, has been the lottery, the Heritage Lottery. So I can't guarantee you'll win any money, but if you do want to buy a lottery ticket, they have supported so many projects, so many conservation initiatives over the years and have been, you know, really wonderful. We wouldn't have been able to do what we've done without the lottery. So a quick shout out for them. We've also had money from LEADER, European Fund, and luckily, just in this last year, we've had some other groups supporting us, one of which is called the Southern Upland Moorland Group, which is a group of gamekeepers in the south of Scotland, which I think surprises some people that they've been involved, but they've been a really key group that have supported the project, and we're really, really keen to have them on board. We've also been working with the University of Edinburgh, the Royal Veterinary School, who have been fantastic and supported us through various aspects of the eagle work, which I'll come on to later. And the SRSG, which is the Scottish Raptor Study Groups. So that's groups all across Scotland made up of volunteers that monitor birds of prey of all varieties, from barn owls up to golden eagles, and have helped us source birds for the project over the years. So it has been a real partnership, a lot of people involved in this project. So I'm going to take you back a few years just to explain why we've been kind of doing our project. This is an extract from a paper back in 2012, Evans et al., looking at the history of eagles in Britain and Ireland. So the maps that you've got there are showing a kind of reconstruction of historical ranges of both golden and white-tailed eagles. So we're focusing on the golden eagles this evening. So the golden eagles are the dark grey dots, the white-tails are the light grey, and black are where both species are present. But as you can see, you know, over the years, the numbers have dwindled through human intervention primarily. We've seen them as competition, we've seen them as a threat, and they have been persecuted through various means over the years. And in about 1920, we're really kind of driven to the real kind of corners of the Highlands of Scotland. So the very remote areas. Oh, sorry, was that you, Jeff?
Sorry, Kat, I'm not sure if it was my end or yours, but I just lost signal and yours is showing us a bit unstable there. Just go back a few seconds and do that, but it might be me, but if you do, we make sure people get it. Thank you.
Apologies. Yeah, I am speaking from a very rural, remote spot in the Scottish borders, so forgive me if our broadband's a bit unreliable. But as you can see from the map C there, in the 1920s, the golden eagles were really driven to the kind of furthest, most remote corners of the Highlands, and that was through human activity, human intervention. So we believe that they probably held on there just far away from people where they couldn't be persecuted and taken out. So they weren't driven to extinction completely, but they were driven to very, very low numbers. And since that time, the numbers have been gradually rising. So since the kind of more robust legal protection came into place in the 1950s, the numbers of golden eagles have increased all across the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. So there's national surveys done about every 10 years, and those surveys have indicated that the numbers have been growing year on year and looking really positive in Scotland. So there's now more than 500 pairs of golden eagles recorded across the Highlands and Islands. And that increase has been fantastic to see, but we haven't seen that increase in the south of Scotland. So effectively, we're classing that as anything below the central belt, kind of Glasgow, Edinburgh. And those numbers there have stayed fairly stable at very, very low numbers. So currently, or when the project began, sorry, there were 3 pairs of golden eagles, so effectively six golden eagles in the whole of the south of Scotland. And those numbers had remained very, very low for a long time. And no one could really explain why that was happening. And it was several years ago, about 2008, that a golden eagle was found poisoned in the Scottish borders. There's quite a famous photo of a guy, Mark Rafferty, holding it up. And that sparked a debate, you know, was it low levels of persecution that were holding the population down, that weren't allowing it to grow, or were there other things involved? And at that point, RSPB and Scottish Land and Estates came together and decided that they wanted to try and answer this question and do something about it. So the idea of a kind of reinforcement or a reintroduction project came to be. So as I mentioned, it wasn't a full reintroduction because there were still golden eagles there in very low numbers. But the idea was to give them a helping hand before that population potentially went locally extinct. And it was a very, very small fragmented population, very isolated from the other birds in Scotland, in the Highlands and Islands. And we were seeing very limited recruitment into the southern population. And by recruitment, I mean young birds moving down into the population to help it grow. And this figure here just looks at some satellite tag data that's been brought together from many different contributors. And you can probably see that there's very, very little movement between the Highlands and Islands of Scotland and down into the south. In fact, there's just one line, and that's one journey from one bird that was recorded crossing that central belt. And that was actually a golden eagle tagged in the south of Scotland that moved north, actually went up into the Highlands and suddenly died up in the Monoliaths. So we have no records of birds moving from the Highlands and Islands down into the south of Scotland. And the worry there was, if we didn't give these birds a helping hand, then they probably wouldn't get there on their own, at least for many, many years. So that's why we've decided to go ahead with a translocation. And there was a feasibility done, or a kind of study done back in 2014 by Drs. Fielding and Howarth that looked at a range of things, really. So reasons for historical decline, lack of increase, looked at habitat availability, food availability, all sorts of things, and looked at historical place names and did some modelling and estimated that the south of Scotland could hold somewhere between 11 to 16 pairs of golden eagles. So just an estimation, but indicated that it was, had the ability to hold, greater number of eagles than just the 3 pairs that were there. So with all that information put together, we decided to go for a translocation. And I joined the project, or the kind of movement, back in about 2015 and worked on the licensing and funding to put this together. So our first physical translocation of golden eagles was in the summer of 2018. And we've worked with established protocols, conservation, translocation, so moving birds of prey. We typically look for nests of twins, so 2 chicks in the nests, which is quite unusual for a golden eagle. They'll typically lay 2 eggs, but it is quite unusual for both of those eggs to hatch and both of the chicks to make it to fledging. Quite often you might get 2 chicks hatching, but one will kill the other. It's called a kind of Cain and Abel behavior. And from a nature point of view, having 1 strong, healthy chick is much better than having 2 weaker chicks. So while it can be quite brutal, it can, kind of benefit the population in the long term. So trying to find nests of twins is really quite difficult, and we do that with the help of the Scottish Raptor study groups. And they monitor nests all across Scotland, and they can call us and tell us in kind of May, June time when they found a nest of twins. And we very quickly scrabble about and get permissions from landowners and so forth. And we're looking for chicks at about this age in the photo, so somewhere between 5 and 8 weeks old. Any younger than 5 weeks old and they're not able to thermoregulate, they can't keep themselves warm, so they would need incubating, and they're not able to pick and tear at food themselves, which we need them to be able to do. If we took them younger than that, you could potentially, have them in a heated aviary, feeding them, by hand, potentially with puppets, like you might have seen done with cranes. But we were able to get enough birds to just take them within that kind of 5 to 8 week window. And that means that when we get them back into the aviaries, we don't have to heat them and we don't have to hand feed them, which is really key because golden eagles can imprint on human beings quite easily. So that's why we've chosen to do it this way. If you'd like to see a video of that whole kind of collection process, you can go to our website, or I can send the link out to Jeff, who can share it with the members. So we've chosen to do things slightly differently from other projects. We've tried to learn as we can from others that have been doing raptor translocations over the years. And we've chosen to, firstly, the project team, so myself and John Wright, our Eagle officer, would make the visit to every single nest. We were in the kind of nice position, I suppose, of moving golden eagles within Scotland. So we weren't moving them internationally. We weren't having to kind of fly them anywhere. So whilst we were doing some quite long distances up from the Outer Hebrides down to the south of Scotland, it's a good long drive. We wanted to try and get chicks from the nest back to our aviaries in a shorter time as we possibly could. And that meant our team driving to every nest, collecting every chick and bringing it back within that day if we could. And we managed that with most chicks. That's to minimise the stress to the bird. It does involve some handling. The second thing that we did was we took a vet with us to every nest to do a health check on the chicks. And the guy on the left is our vet, Neil, from the Edinburgh Vet School. That's never really been done before in this kind of situation, but we tried to learn from other projects like the Irish Golden Eagle Project that had some chicks collected that just weren't healthy enough to release. And chicks going through a translocation do have quite a high hurdle to reach. They need to be strong and fit and healthy. So we decided to take a vet with us, and they would do a health check on the chick that we took and the chick in the nest to make sure that we were leaving a healthy chick as well. And the other 2 in the photo there are climbers. So all the health and safety to get them safely into the nests, which, as you can imagine, are quite remote, sometimes quite a long walk up a hill or dangling over a cliff. So we get to the nest. As I say, we'd typically take both chicks from the nest and do a health check on them, make sure they were both healthy, so that the chick we left behind was going to fledge as well. So we'd leave 1 chick in the nest. This is a nest up on Colonsay that we took back in 2023, I think she says, guessing. So we leave 1 chick in the nest, which has its metal rings fitted, and we take 1 chick with us. you can see the chick on the ground there has a falconry hood fitted, and we don't typically do that with many of the chicks because they're quite placid when you take them from the nest. They are a good size. They're normally about 3 kilograms or more at that age. They haven't really learned how to use their talons yet, so they're not particularly dangerous. You can pretty much just kind of scoop them up and sit them down. But this female was particularly feisty. And when we had her on the ground to do the health checks and things, she kept trying to bite us, which you don't often see in golden eagles, or at least not at this age. So we did end up having to hood her just temporarily to keep her nice and quiet. But they were both healthy chicks. So we take them from the nest, we walk them down in that kind of wicker basket that you could see on the back of the eagle officer in the previous photo. And we put them into a travel box, like the one in the photograph here. So this is designed by falconers who fly their golden eagles around the world. And we use this design because it keeps the bird nice and dark, nice and quiet, but there's good airflow for the chick while it's in there. It's on a nice big chunk of memory foam in the back of the van because we are going over some difficult ground, bouncing around. And as I mentioned, we'd get the chick from the nest down to the aviary in as short a time as possible. And that was typically about 7 to 8 hours. So it meant a very early start, leaving in the month of June. We'd head up north, find a chick and bring it back down. But we could get them back into the aviary that same day, which meant that they were, they could settle, they could relax, and they could eat if they want to in quite a short time, which was really important for us. There we go. Right, here's our first video. Let's see if it's going to cooperate. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Oh, we have got sound. So these were the first 2 chicks that we collected on the project. This is Edward and Beaky. And rather unusually, we collected these 2 chicks on the same day. Normally it's one nest and 1 chick at a time, but these 2 chicks came from nests on the same estate. So we were able to do one after the other and bring them both down. So whilst they came from different nests, they went into an aviary together. They bonded very, very quickly. So it's quite a shock to the system for them to be taken from a nest handled by humans and put into an aviary, but they bond quite quickly once they get into the aviary there. We do sometimes keep chicks on their own. Typically, we'll try and get 2 together about the same age. We try, if we can, to put males and females kind of together, keep the 2 sexes separate. And that's just because we believe that there's a kind of sibling aversion. So if chicks are raised in the same nest together, they will see themselves as biological siblings, even if they are adopted as such, and potentially won't then see each other as mates once they kind of get out in the wider population. So when we've needed to, we have put male and female together like Edward and Beaky, but quite often we don't. This bird here is, her name is Paradise, but her ring number is L11, so we called her Bingo for the first few weeks until she got her proper name. This is the female that we took from Colonsay. So she actually was quite a feisty young lady. And when we tried to put her in with another chick, that chick leapt off the nest in horror. So we ended up keeping Paradise here on her own. But it's not unusual. It's a far more normal situation for a golden eagle chick to be on its own. So they do absolutely fine by themselves. And they're in the aviaries for about 6 to 8 weeks. So we get them in June. Their job, once they're in the aviary, is to grow, is to eat and grow effectively. They don't have much else to do. They sit on the nest, an artificial nest platform there. All the videos that I'm showing you here inside the aviaries are not filmed by people close to the eagles. They're actually filmed through a little kind of spy hole in the wall of the aviary. So the bird cannot see us. They don't know that we're there and they don't know that we're filming. And you can see it's quite kind of comfortable doing what it's doing. So we keep ourselves very much away from the eagles. And the only time that they see us is at the time of collection and at the time of release. So there is a little bit of wind on this video. I had tried to turn the sound off, but it's not cooperating. If you can still hear me, this is Beaky here, and she's on the ground for the first time, experiencing the bracken and the grass. I'll let that pass for a moment so you can actually see what she's doing. But this is really wonderful behavior that you wouldn't normally get to see in the wild. This would be, a chick in a very remote nest with a parent bird that's looking after it. That's Edward just coming down to see what she's up to. So those birds there are in the aviary, as I say, for about 6 to 8 weeks. We feed them on as much natural food as we can find for them. So we're giving them rabbits, we're giving them grey squirrels that are managed in the south of Scotland. Everything's lead-free. But we try and give them as much natural food as we can so that they can learn to recognise the prey as they get older and out and about. We do kind of cut the food up to begin with as they're kind of learning, but they do very much have the instincts to pluck and to kind of tear at food themselves. It's really wonderful seeing them have a squirrel for the first time. There's something about a little fluffy grey squirrel tail that gets them very excited, and you can see them kind of practicing those kind of prey instincts on them. This is Edward here. So in a normal situation, in a natural kind of nest, an eagle chick would kind of fledge the nest when they can just about fly. It'll vary depending on whether it's a cliff nest or a tree nest where they can kind of branch out a little bit. We want our golden eagles to be able to be much more confident flyers than in a natural situation, because in a natural situation there are parents there to feed them, so the parents can bring them food. Our birds need to be able to fly quite well from day one because they need to find the food themselves, and we provide that for them. So what we do is we hold them back a little bit longer than in a normal situation, and we provide them with perches so that they can exercise, they can build the muscle in their wings that they need. That's lovely Edward there just before he was released. So those birds are very fit, very healthy when they're ready to go at about that kind of age, when they're full size that they will ever be. We capture them once more and we fit them with a satellite tag so that we can monitor their movements when they're out and about, and they get a final health check there from the vet just to make sure that everything is good. All the birds that we've released have been very fit, very strong, very healthy. We wouldn't be releasing a bird unless we thought it was kind of fit and strong and ready to go. At the release of the chicks, and I'll say this before the video starts in case the sound is strong, we have no one present at the release of our chicks. We're sometimes under pressure to have the press or ministers or someone there to, kind of get the good PR. But this is the first time that they've been out, the first time that they've flown, and it's a very difficult, very stressful time for them. We need them to be completely unpressured and undisturbed. So this is actually filmed by our eagle officer down his telescope from about 600 meters away in a hide. We have no one else at the release. We have someone to open the kind of door of the aviaries. As you can see, there's a little rope there, so it's kind of dropped around the front, and then the eagles can come out in their own time and kind of go where they will. And it's wonderful to see. Some of the birds will shoot out in 60 seconds. Others might take half an hour or an hour to get the kind of, the courage up to go. These birds here, one of them actually jumped up onto the door to look out, went back into the aviary and had breakfast, and then left about half an hour later, which we've never seen before. Normally, once the door is open and they can see the big wide world, they want to be out. And it's such a privilege to work on a project like this. This is all filmed by our eagle officer, but we get to see the eagles experiencing the environment, the world for the first time. So they're feeling the wind under their wings. They're playing with clods of earth or a sheep skull, I think one of them found. We do provide little perches for them, so if they want to get up off the ground, they can. But quite often, when they're first out, they can fly, but they don't have the muscle to really do long, sustained flights yet. So like any other, they'll do a little flight, and they spend a lot of time on the ground. They'll actually walk quite a lot in their first few days. Golden eagles spend a lot of time on the ground anyway. But after a day or two, you really see them just gain confidence in the sky. So they learn to use those wings. They learn to, to use the air and the currents on the hills to get up there. And it's really wonderful seeing them, as I say, kind of build that confidence and see the tables turn sometimes on species like buzzards or ravens that can sometimes pester the young eagles when they're first out. And when you see the eagles kind of just learn that they're bigger and faster and stronger than a raven, it's wonderful. They can just turn and suddenly the raven thinks, right, I'm out of here. I'm going to keep my distance for a while now. So once the eagles are out, they have the instinct to fly. They have the instinct to, quite often they'll try and get kind of further up the valley. So they like to be up at the top, kind of looking down into the valley. So our eagle officer's job next is to supply them with food. And as I mentioned, we can't take food to them because we would then be disturbing them. So what we have to do is try and predict where they're going to go and put out either kind of food platforms raised off the ground or food on the ground, depending on whether there's kind of ground predators around and things like that. This site here did have foxes and badgers, so we ended up raising the food off the ground just to make sure that the chicks were getting to the food. We have the satellite tags on their back, but they're not moving around a huge amount at this kind of time. So we also have trail cameras like this one that can help confirm the identity of the bird so that we know which bird has fed you know, and how often they're feeding, which for the first few days is really important, because when we open that door, I'm often asked, you know, is it really exciting when you let these birds go? And I always say, no, it's really stressful. It's the most worrying time of the whole part of the process, because we've had them safe in an aviary. We know they're happy, they're healthy. But once they're out, they're on their own. They're wild birds. We can't catch them. You know, they go where they will, and we just have to hope that we're doing our job the best that we can. So seeing them feed for that first time, quite often it'll be 24 or 48 hours until they feel hungry enough and have got over the excitement of being out. But they'll come in and find these food dumps and make the most of the food. So this is one here. Oh, there you go. You can hear the birds calling. So we did have several raised food platforms, but we found that some of the females, which are bigger than the males, were being a little bit dominant over the food. So we ended up creating a few more on the ground. And this is a young male here. I think this is A31. We called him Fatty because he came from a nest where food was a little bit scarce, and he'd obviously learnt to fight with his sibling in the nest for food. So when he found these big kind of deer carcasses and these food out for him, he would kind of protect it. You can see he's mantling over his food there from another bird that's calling overhead. But on occasion, we did see him a few times eat until he was so full that he couldn't move. He'd almost sit there in what we describe as a food coma, which is not really a technical term, but he'd eaten so much he couldn't move, and he would just fall asleep face down on the ground, which when you're worried about their safety is very stressful, I can tell you. But he was absolutely fine. Once he'd digested a bit of that food, he was up and away and has done absolutely fine. But we start them off on smaller prey, things like rabbits and crows, and we gradually move them on to larger carrion items like deer or foxes and other bits and pieces. This video is hopefully playing. You can just see the feathers kind of ruffling on this eagle. So this is another site that we used. We had 6 birds released this year. And again, this is filmed down a telescope by our eagle officer from about 800 meters away. So the birds weren't disturbed. And this is something that you'd never see in a natural situation, because you wouldn't have 6, 7, 8 juveniles all flying around together. It's absolutely wonderful. So when they get out, they learn to use their wings, they're learning to fly, and then they're interacting with each other. They're learning all those skills that they need to be wild eagles. So they're learning to swoop, they're learning to fight. This is all instinct, so we don't have to teach them any of this. We know from other raptor conservation projects and translocations that they don't need to be taught to hunt. They have the instinct to do that. And you can see these birds here, hopefully this is playing for you, are tussling over a plastic tree guard that they found. This area had been kind of planted up with some deciduous trees. And they're using this as a kind of mock prey item as they kind of tussle in the sky. You can just see it's kind of dropped to the ground there. Forgive me on the quality of this this footage, but this was filmed in the field with as I say, through a kind of telescope and a small camera. This wasn't a kind of professional kit. But you can see them there. This bird that comes in here needs a wee bit more practice on landing gracefully, a bit of a kind of crash landing there. But these are the things that they learn, and they would learn this out with parents in a kind of natural situation. But here they learn it in this kind of nursery site. And it's our job on the project to find a site that's nice and quiet and calm for those birds to do that in. So this is really the kind of the most worrying time, but they've all got through that period, which has been brilliant. And sorry, before I go on to that one, I'll come back to this one again. So we're often asked, well, how do they go? You know, when do they find the food? How do they leave? Do you stop feeding them or something? And the answer is the birds will go when they want to. So they have that instinct to explore. As they get up, they're circling in the sky. They'll be seeing the hills around them. You know, golden eagle's eyesight is phenomenal and far, far better than our own. So as they get up, they want to explore and they want to find things. So what we see from the satellite tag data is usually about 6 to 8 weeks after release. So they'll spend 6 to 8 weeks in this kind of release area. They'll get the instinct to go. So it might be one at a time. They might go and, you know, fly a mile or so away and roost somewhere, come back to the food the next day, go on, move away. And they have that instinct to hunt the natural prey themselves. So we've seen quite often they'll find a rabbit warren or something like that, or maybe pheasants, something that's a little bit easier to catch. And once they've caught that warm, fresh meat, it's probably far tastier than eating carrion that we provide for them. So they're off, you know, once they can feed themselves, they'll go, and they're off and about, and they will, you know, start to explore the world around them. So we provide food for them all through the first winter if they want it. Typically, most of our birds will leave the release site between September and early November. So usually by that point they want to go, they will go and explore, they'll go and find things. We do provide food throughout the winter just in case we get particularly poor weather, like we have at the moment, quite a lot of snow on the hills. So if we had youngsters out, we would feed them through that first winter. But once they're out and about, they can hunt for themselves. And every single bird that we've released that's left the release site has learned to hunt successfully, which is really wonderful. So it's and I am aware how lucky I am working on this project. We get to see some wonderful things, and that's why I'm so glad that I can share it with you this evening. So once those juveniles are out and about, they will typically then spend the next kind of 18 months to 3 years exploring their environment. And for these chicks, that's the south of Scotland. So they're moving coast to coast, all the way over to kind of Berwick-upon-Tweed, across to Stranraer, down to the border and up to the central belt. So all of the chicks that we've released in this way have remained in the south of Scotland, which is perfect. It's exactly what we want them to do. So they see the south of Scotland as their natal site, and stay here as they start to explore. As they get a little bit older, they're learning where there might be good food sources, potential territories, other birds, and they'll settle down and find a mate, which I'll come on to shortly. But we've also been working on something a little bit different, and that's something called subadult translocation. So instead of taking a chick from a nest, we are translocating free-flying golden eagles, which is quite fun, quite a challenge. And by subadult, I mean anything between about 4 months old and about 3.5 years. So something that is independent from its parents, hunting for itself, free-flying, but hasn't yet reached an age where it's settled on territory and found itself a mate. And we're doing this under a research license with a fantastic team who are trapping for us the last few winters out in the Outer Hebrides. So we've chosen the Outer Hebrides because it's about as far away from the south of Scotland as you can get within Scotland. And there's also a very good population of subadults there. So the population is almost at capacity. There's a good number of birds wandering around and looking for territory, which is something that we don't have here in the south. So these guys are absolutely amazing. They catch the eagles by setting out a deer bait, a venison bait. The eagles will come down to that bait and they'll have remote cameras on them so they can see when the bird comes in. And then there's a bow trap, which is kind of fired remotely, that flies over the top of the eagle and kind of pins it gently to the ground. At that point, you have to run up the hill as fast as you can to try and get to the eagle out of the net. And this is a guy here, Robin Reid, who's absolutely an amazing ecologist. Worked with him for a few years now. Robin is one of the fittest, healthiest people that I know. Might think that I'm quite healthy out walking the hills, but Robin can run up hills across sphagnum moss and Molinia grass like no one I've ever seen, which is a fantastic skill until you need someone to help you. And on this one occasion, the very, very experienced team never had any problems with the birds, but on this one occasion, Robin lost concentration possibly for just a second, and the eagle that he had in the net there sunk its talons into his hand, right through his hand, and locked on. A golden eagle will kind of lock its feet in place. And Robin was there on his own, trying to get this eagle out of the net, one hand tethered to the eagle. Quite painful, I'm told. And the other team behind him were running up the hill, and got there after a few minutes. But a few minutes can seem like a very long time when you're laid on the ground with a golden eagle talon through your hand. Robin was absolutely fine, and I have to say, incredible professionalism, because the next morning he was at the ferry port to hand over the eagle in a box to our translocation officer. He'd been to hospital, had his hand checked out, but he was all fine, hadn't hit anything major. But yeah, being there the next morning to hand over the eagle that they'd trapped was just pure professionalism. So big shout out to Robin there. So as they catch the eagle in the net, they have to extract it from the net. That's then satellite tagged and transported down to us into one of these travel boxes here, just on the right. Initially, we were putting the birds into our kind of chick release aviaries before we let them go, but these aren't chicks that need time and quiet in order to learn to fly and take their first flight. These are free-flying golden eagles. They're wild birds that want to be out as quickly as possible. So latterly, with most of the birds, what we did was we just released them straight from the box so that we could take them to any location that we wanted across the south of Scotland. But we were doing the health checks at this end with the vet. So what we needed to do was try and extract the eagle from the travel box, which is my job at this end. And that's more difficult than it sounds, because trying to raise the side of the travel box, the first thing that the eagle sees with a bit of daylight is my hands going into where the talons of the eagle are. So it's quite a challenge to get them out without hurting myself or the eagle, more likely myself. So we created this little kind of portable cage here that just meant if I wasn't quick enough at getting the eagle secured and it got out of the box and flew, it wasn't going to get away before we had a chance to kind of get it sorted. So we built this kind of little cage here. This is our eagle officer, John Wright, who's lifting the box, and I'm actually just behind him holding a purple towel, which you might just be able to see, to which I can secure the eagle, get it out, and then we put a hood on it. The female in the kind of top right photo there was a absolute whopper. She was phenomenal. 7 kilograms at the time of trapping, which I think is far higher than has been recorded in Scotland before. The trappers are finding that they are seeing much bigger females than we previously thought. It was thought that they might get up to about 5.5, 6 kilograms, but this was a 7-kilogram whopper. She was huge. We called her Big Bird. And these birds are then given a health check by the vet. So a quick check at the other end, but the vet will do things like check the lungs, the heart, check the eyesight. Typically, if there's anything wrong with a golden eagle, anything that's going to impact its health, it won't be able to hunt, and therefore it goes from healthy to dead fairly quickly. If any of you keep poultry, it's pretty much the same. These birds, golden eagles, need to be able to hunt, and if they aren't healthy enough to hunt, then they will die quite quickly. So if they are flying and out and about, the chances are we've got a healthy bird. But the vets do some checks on them. They also take some blood so that we can DNA test them, just make sure we've got the right sex. But that also helps us further down the line. We pass that on to the National Wildlife Crime Unit, so that should there be an issue in the future, we have DNA for all of the individual eagles that we trap. So they get a quick health check, as you can see, sometimes up on the hill in the snow. And then what we do is we just release these birds from the hand. So we don't have to kind of provide a quiet release site for them or anything like that. They on the ground, and they'll kind of rocket off at speed. But they're all doing really well, and it's really interesting work to be part of, because we're still in the process of kind of learning what happens. So the thing that we wanted to test with this methodology was, will they stay or will they go back? If we're bringing them down as free-flying birds, as subadults, will they stay at their release site in the south of Scotland, or will they try and return home to where they fledged in the Outer Hebrides? So we're partway through this. This work hasn't been kind of analysed or published in any way yet. We're still kind of partway through it. But so far, and we've been doing this over the last kind of 2 years, out of 15 birds that we've moved, 14 from the Outer Hebrides, 1 from Argyll, 8 have moved north out of the south of Scotland, and 7 have stayed in the south of Scotland. So at the moment, it's about 50-50 as to whether they'll go or they'll stay, which is really interesting, because we didn't know that any would stay at all. One of those birds that left the south of Scotland has actually returned to the Isle of Lewis, which was an incredible journey to see. It's not this one I'm showing you here, but it went out onto right at the edge of the Isle of Skye and actually crossed the sea over to the Isle of Lewis, which is incredible in itself, because there's very, very few records of birds crossing large bodies of water like that, of golden eagles crossing large bodies of water. So to see it actually have that drive to go home, that bird had obviously imprinted on the area that it was in and wanted to get back there, which it did. Out of the other birds that have left the south of Scotland, they are kind of moving all over, really. We've got one that has settled on territory, the Isle of Skye, but the others are still moving about. Some are still coming back down to the south. And we've got 3 that have settled on territory in the south of Scotland now, which is brilliant. So, and made 1 breeding attempt this year. So they can stay. We don't know what it is, whether it's the age that we get them at, or whether they just haven't found suitable area up north. But we'll keep you posted on that one, because it could be a really exciting tool for conservation translocations of raptors in the future. So alongside the really fun part of working with the birds is, I think, the really key part of ensuring a positive future for them in the south of Scotland. So alongside moving both the juveniles and subadults, we needed to do some work to try and minimise the reasons for historical decline. And the main reason for that is people. In one way or another, we've altered the habitat, or we've kind of actively persecuted them. So we've done that through stakeholder engagement and education work. And the stakeholder engagement has been really key. And we've gone about that in a few ways. So the first of that is to try and build a genuine partnership between land management and conservation. Historically, land management partners have expressed that they've often felt notified about projects that are happening, but not involved. And we really wanted the land management sector to be really actively involved in this project, to be welcoming golden eagles rather than just kind of, passively accepting them. And we've done that in a few ways. So the first thing that we've done is we've shared the location of eagles with landowners and land managers, and that means gamekeepers, that means foresters, that means farmers. So anytime that an eagle has spent a bit of time on some land, that might be a day or two, we would call up and we would say, look, Mr. Gamekeeper, there's an eagle on your patch of land here. Look out for it. Let us know if you see it. Any sightings? That's great. We were criticised quite heavily for that because people said, well, God, you're telling gamekeepers there's eagles out there, they're all going to get shot. And we said, well, we need to move along. If the eagles are being shot, then people know that they're anyway. By sharing that news, we're building trust, we're sharing information, and in a very nice way, we're saying that, we know that you know that they know that they're there. Also listening to their concerns. So I think having someone there to speak to, someone that we could, put them in contact with keepers or estates up north, and listen to what their concerns were and explain it, I think has been really important as well. So having a team there to answer those questions has been really key. We've also been very open and honest about any failures or challenges that we've had as a team, as a project. One of the concerns that we had that was, well, any eagle that dies, the nearest guy with a shotgun license is going to be in the firing line. He'll be immediately assumed that he's done something. So what we said we would do is that we'd be completely open about what happened to any eagle that died on our project, and we have done that. I'll come onto those in a moment, but we've been open about when a tag has failed, when a tag has fallen off, when an eagle has been killed in natural circumstances. We've been completely open about that, and I think that's been really key as well. So it's just opening people's eyes to learn a little bit more about kind of what they're doing and how they've died. And we've also had a dedicated member of staff involved here, and his name's Brian Burrows. He was a retired keeper, and he's been a really, really key part of this project and a really key role. So having a dedicated full-time member of staff, someone who is kind of known and respected within the industry, has been really important. And the main focus has been the shooting estates, because sadly we know historically that's where many of the persecution issues have been in the past, but has also been speaking to forestry and farmers and anyone in the south of Scotland who might, kind of be engaging with golden eagles. Forgive me, I think I'm going to go slightly over time, so do you do yell at me, Jeff, if you need me to speed up. I've got a few more slides to go. Another aspect of our project that has been really, really key and really valuable is the community engagement. So we've had 2 full-time members of staff who have been out there working with people of all ages, so everything from nursery kids, through to kind of retirement homes, sharing news about what we're doing. So we're now over 30,000 participants involved in the project, which is absolutely fantastic. 31 primary schools and 24 tertiary education establishments. But working on all sorts of different activities to tell people, what is a golden eagle? Where are they? What are they doing? Why are we doing our project? What could it mean to you? We've worked with local estates. This is an example here of an estate who got in touch with us. They were expanding a cafe on their estate, and they had a bit of space. They said, well, would you like to build a kind of mini golden eagle centre? So we said, absolutely, yes, please. So we've worked with them and had interpretation information, videos about the project. We've got children's games and things like that. So it's a kind of little snippet there, an example maybe of what could be seen in the future to get people involved and excited about eagles. Excuse me. Something else that we've done is we've started an annual Golden Eagle Festival. So this is in the town of Moffat, which is pretty much in the kind of centre of the south of Scotland. Worked in partnership with the community to organise events, like, music, food, guided walks, talks, all sorts of things. Anything that we could find that was related to golden eagles to get people interested, to raise awareness about eagles in the project, but also to try and attract people into the area. We put this festival on typically around the end of September, at a time when accommodation providers in the area were very quiet and didn't have a huge amount of business. And it's been a huge success. When we put the festival on, all of the accommodation is booked out within Moffat and surrounding areas. A huge benefit to the town. The community's really come on board and are kind of promoting themselves as Scotland's first eagle town. So it's now a great place to go and see eagles. In fact, one of the birds that I've spoken to you about already, CO9, Edward, he was named by the Moffat Primary School, and he's actually settled on territory with a mate very close to the town of Moffat. So it's really wonderful, and people are actually seeing him out and about, which is just brilliant. We have had a few stumbles along the way. So we are working with animals, with wild birds. They don't always survive, but our overall survival rate has been 83% so far, which is just fantastic for the chicks that we're releasing. In a normal situation like this, in a translocation project, you might normally be happy to get 40% up to kind of 5 years old and breeding. So to have 83% at this stage is just fantastic, and we're really, really pleased to see that. But we have lost some birds. I'm going to show a couple of photos now of dead eagles, so if you are sensitive, please do look away for the next few. So in 2019, we actually lost 2 chicks through an eagle attack, one of our own eagles that we'd released. This was Beaky, bless her, the little fluffy one from one of the first videos. In 2018, she was released, and we'd used the same release site the following year. This is quite a long story, so I'm going to have to give you the highlights. But she'd moved away. She'd spent several months away from that site. But when we released youngsters the next year, we had 3 young males that we released. Beaky actually came back to that site and attacked and killed 2 of the birds. One we found dead. We recovered the body. The second we never recovered, but the examples there that the situation was very, very similar. So we presumed that she killed him and probably damaged the tag in the attack. A third eagle we actually managed to rescue. And this is the photo here that our eagle officer took from a distance. The bird was behaving very, very peculiarly, was very kind of aggressive, and she was mantling over a kind of patch of bracken on the ground. And John watched this for about 45 minutes and thought, this is really odd behaviour. No one's seen anything like this before. And eventually he saw a kind of flap of a wing in the vegetation on the ground, realised that there was an eagle chick down there and thought, right, she's obviously got one cornered. So normally we don't intervene, we wouldn't do anything, but he got a little bit closer. She didn't fly away, got a little bit closer, got within about, he said, 20 metres of her. And she's still sat on the fence looking at him. And he thought, well, this is really peculiar. Eventually, she flew away. And as he wandered up, he found C-17, Scan, as he's known, on the ground, kind of cowering from her. Assumed that this bird would kind of fly away once its attacker was gone, but it didn't. It just kind of cowered on the ground. So presuming it was probably injured, he picked it up and carried it back to the aviary. Long story short, Scan was actually fine. Beaky hadn't got to him yet, so he was uninjured, but he was just very, very frightened and hungry and thirsty. So we put him back in the aviary. We actually released him at a different site, and he's doing very well now. What's even more peculiar is Beaky has chosen her mate, settled on territory now, and she chose C-17, Scan, the bird that she tried to kill in 2019. They have now paired up and made several breeding attempts, and we're hoping that they will become parents, hopefully, in this coming year. So some very unusual behaviour there. We'll maybe talk about that on another occasion. We have sadly faced one incidence of persecution. So this was just over a year and a bit ago now, so October 23. This is the only case that we found, but sadly it does mean that the problem hasn't been solved completely. This bird was roosting in a tree here on the right-hand side. You can see we had roosting data from that point in the tree, and the tag data stopped suddenly, which is very, very unusual. Typically, if you have a tag malfunction or something, it will be kind of a bit intermittent and come and go. This tag just stopped straight away, so we knew that something was wrong. Went in the next morning to have a look, just to kind of check and see what was going on. And there was almost no sign of anything, but our Golden Eagle officer, John, is absolutely fantastic and is very, very meticulous, very determined. So he hunted around until he found just a few tiny, tiny little down feathers and a tiny spot of blood on the grass. And at that point he said, right, we've got a case of persecution here, we need to call the police. So the police came in and had a good look. And below that tiny spot of blood in the moss was actually a pool of blood. It had seeped right down into the moss. And what we think had happened is this bird, the female Merrick, was roosting in the tree. So this was dark. It would have been 6, 7 o'clock in October. We believe, we can't prove this, we believe that she was shot with a rifle, thermal imaging equipment on the rifle. The body was recovered, obviously destroyed, disposed of. Frustratingly, even with all this that we'd found, there wasn't enough evidence to take this person to court. We have a very good idea of who it was, but I'm not allowed to give any more detail than that. I've been very kindly threatened by the lawyer. So it does still happen. Incredibly frustrating, but a small number of what we're seeing out of the birds that we've released. We also had a case just last summer of another eagle attack, but in this case, a much more kind of natural, normal situation. This was a 2-year-old bird that was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The one active golden eagle nest in the borders that was producing young, this was June, the young were right on the verge of fledging, and this bird here, Thistle, just wandered too close to the nest at the wrong time, and we believe that he was probably chased and attacked by that breeding female. She has a satellite tag on her as well. So we found him underneath some trees in a very good body condition. He'd eaten shortly before he fed, but puncture wounds to the head and sternum, which is typical of an eagle attack. We believe that he was probably chased, attacked, and kind of crushed, landed into the wood here. So really sad to lose a good, healthy bird, but in a natural, completely natural behaviour. The breeding female from that local nest actually roosted almost above the body of this thistle that night. So that's why we suspect she was probably involved. But again, defending her young, so doing something completely natural there. Sadly, this next one, well, it wasn't deliberate, but sadly it was kind of man-related, shall we say. This was the first case that we've seen of a turbine strike in the south of Scotland. It is quite rare. As far as we know, there's been 6 golden eagles killed so far by turbines in Scotland. I say so far because I don't believe it's going to be the last that we see. That's my personal opinion. This bird, Sparky, wasn't actually a bird that we have released as part of the translocation. He came from one of the nests in the south of Scotland, naturally fledged bird, but we had him satellite tagged as part of our studies to kind of look at, compare his behaviour to the translocated birds. So we found him last summer. Sadly, as you can see, one wing completely severed. We do go through a full protocol with these birds, so we do get them post-mortemed and things just to double check, but his other wing was actually found about 40-50 meters away, blown up against a deer fence. So you might think, kind of fairly obvious, but just absolutely gutting to lose a beautiful bird in this way. This was the body that were recovered from below the turbine here. As you can see, he's kind of gone straight down from, this was 20 meters underneath the turbine. The ground was quite soft, so I had to kind of pull his body out of the peat, which is a little bit gruesome. But you can see where the kind of head and wing were actually kind of embedded in the ground. So we think that he hit the ground with quite a lot of force, and probably, we're hoping, died instantaneously. He had head injury alongside the wing being severed, so we're hoping that it was a fairly quick death, but just very, very sad to see. No blame at all at the wind farm company. They'd done their kind of surveying required beforehand. Sadly, when the surveying was done, it was before this project began, and whilst there were golden eagles around, this was maybe 20 kilometres from this bird's natal site, they didn't see any birds during their survey work, so the wind farm was given the go-ahead, which is really sad. But we're hoping to work with wind farm companies in the future in the south of Scotland to do some cumulative impact work and use of all our tag data that we have and try and guide where turbines can be built without having future conflicts with golden eagles. Really sad, that one. The final bird that we had, a female called Sula, rather frustratingly goes down as unexplained. I can tell you what it wasn't, but I can't tell you what it was. This was actually found by a gamekeeper on a shooting estate. He called the police and came in and they collected it. So it was negative for highly pathogenic avian influenza, so it wasn't bird flu. It was negative for traces of poison. There was no signs of shot on the X-ray or the CT scan. No visible injuries externally, no injuries internally. In very good condition. She hadn't starved. She was very well muscled, even had good levels of fat. We can't say for definite what it was. She had been dead a couple of days before she was found, so it's possible that some of the tests just couldn't show what happened. She was found underneath power lines, so it's possible it was an electrocution. Not all electrocuted birds, animals, show evidence of the kind of the shock, the burn that you might see. So it is possible that it was that, but unfortunately it goes down as unexplained. But overall, we have had really good success for the project. So as I say, we're being very open about what has gone wrong, because we want people to understand what can happen to golden eagles in all sorts of different settings. But in the last kind of 6-7 years, we've taken the population from around 6 birds to just under 50 now in the south of Scotland, which is fantastic. In that short space of time, to see more eagles than they've seen in the last 300 years is just brilliant. As I say, about 83% survival of the translocated chicks, which is fantastic. Couldn't have asked for better. We have 12 new occupied territories formed now in the south of Scotland, so that's 15 in total, which again is just really eye-wateringly brilliant. We couldn't explain how fantastic we think that is. Fantastic support and engagement from communities. We've put a lot of work into it, but the support that we've had back, the feedback's been brilliant, and that's so key to the long-term success of these birds. And I think a genuine partnership between land management and conservation. Whilst I can't say for definite who it was who persecuted that bird, we have a good idea. And there was such an outcry, not only from the public, but from the industry, which we suspect that person came from. Things are changing, attitudes are changing. It's slow. We know persecution still happens to other species, things like hen harriers, buzzards, goshawks, all across England and Scotland. So it's not a thing of the past, but things are changing, attitudes are changing. And I think having landowners, having gamekeepers involved, actively part of this project is really, really key, and I think is going to be important in the next phase that we go to. So I'm nearly there. I promise I've gone slightly over time. So what are the next steps for us for our project?
Sorry, don't worry about time. What I would say to people if they need to leave at 8:30 is that we are recording this, and within a couple of days it will be available via the resources section on the YRN website, where you can click through to see it on YouTube. So please keep going, and people can catch up if they can't stay now.
Brilliant. I will do. Thanks, Jeff. So yeah, the last 6-7 years have been just fantastic. Really, really pleased how things have gone. But we need to kind of do the next step of this project. And the next steps for us are threefold. So one is to continue to support stakeholders in the south of Scotland and eagles. So, to walk away from the translocation at this point, I think would be a big mistake. The population needs longer term support. So golden eagles are a very long-lived bird. We have the record holder now for golden eagle, a living golden eagle in Scotland, is the breeding male at that nest in the Borders. He's 34 years old and still going strong. He produced twins with his mate this year. So we're presuming, potentially it could be up to 40 years old, but no one really knows. You only know this through kind of ringing activities, which haven't been going on that long. So a very long-lived species. The population is starting to settle. We have those 12 new territories establishing, but the boundaries of those are still coming together. Some of those are single birds, not all of them are pairs. And several of those pairs are still building nests, kind of deciding on where they're going to be and where they're using. And that kind of information is so key for those kind of landowners, those land managers, the people that kind of live and work in the land there. So we want to partly be a voice for golden eagle protection in the south of Scotland. There is a big pressure from both wind farms and forestry in the south of Scotland, commercial forestry. So a big pressure on available habitat for golden eagles. And we want to try and be a voice for golden eagles. So having someone there who can maybe challenge some of these development proposals, share our data so that we can advise where are the best places and where not. Scottish Government is always saying that it's the first to recognise the twin climate and biodiversity crisis. And I always say that biodiversity is right at the bottom of that pile every single time. You'll see that yourselves, and it's so frustrating. So we want to try and work with the industry and show that by tackling climate change and having green energy, renewable energy, which is fantastic, we fully support it, but doing it in a way that's sensitive to biodiversity. Turbines aren't just, and forestry, aren't just a problem potentially for golden eagles. There's all sorts of other species out there, from black grouse to mountain hares to curlews, and development of the uplands can have an impact on them as well. So we want to try and work with those industries to find the best way moving forward. The second of those things is exploring opportunities for nature-based tourism. And that could be through a nest camera or a viewpoint or a visitor centre or something along those lines. Something that we've looked at over the last few years, but we haven't really had the number of eagles to involve people, to kind of show people. And there's a few reasons for that. It's not a case of making a profit from the work that we've done, absolutely not. But there's three reasons. And one of those is to encourage enjoyment of golden eagles. We want people to enjoy them and enjoy having them around. The long-term population success really depends on support and the will of human beings to have them around. If we don't want them there, then we'll eradicate them. We've seen it happen in the past. So we need people to support them and love them and want them there. And enjoying, allowing people or helping people to actively view and enjoy the birds, I think is really, really important to that long-term future. The second thing is highlighting the benefits that golden eagles can bring to an area. So economic benefit. So it's showing those who might see golden eagles as an impediment to their way of life, to their income, which could potentially be wind farm developers, landowners, commercial foresters, farmers, potentially. Anyone who might see golden eagles as an impediment, that golden eagles can have an economic benefit. So whether that is through a holiday cottage or wildlife tours or visitors coming into that area to enjoy the biodiversity as a whole, it's really important that we build on the work that we've done and show people the benefits that golden eagles as an apex predator, part of that whole kind of ecosystem, can have. So that's something that we'd like to explore in the coming years. And the third thing is managing the visitor interest pressure on golden eagles. Golden eagles are very sensitive to disturbance. They don't particularly like people. So showing golden eagles to people can be quite a challenge. And we're really keen to find ways of doing that and focus most of the attention that we can away from sensitive sites or sensitive pairs and actually kind of manage that pressure so that we can have both the benefits of nature-based tourism and the benefits of golden eagles as well. So that's a really important step that we're looking at exploring. And the final thing, which is maybe most exciting to some of you here this evening, is supporting eagles as they explore Northern England. So the southern uplands that the golden eagles have kind of been repopulating, reinforcing. There's a line on a map between Scotland and England. The golden eagles don't know it's there, and they will quite happily move from the southern uplands down into the uplands of Northumberland. Our golden eagles are already exploring the English uplands. We know that from our satellite tag data. We've been monitoring the birds as they move about. And we've also been doing stakeholder engagement work. So whilst our funding and our project has been Scottish based, our funders have allowed us to do a little bit of work on the English side. Again, just to notify landowners, to do some of that engagement to make sure that the birds are safe as they've moved around. And they have done so far. But most excitingly, Forestry England and Natural England have been working on a feasibility study looking at golden eagles all across England and whether there is the habitat and the food and the kind of resources that they would need. And that study is hopefully going to be concluded this year, so we'll be able to build on that. And the early indications are that, yes, England can support golden eagles. We know from our satellite tag data the types of areas that those eagles are utilising. They're sticking, as you might expect, to the uplands, to those kind of moorland areas that people think are eagly. It's where the eagles are going. So the first journey that we had from our birds down into England was from Beaky, the famous Beaky, back in April 2020. So when we were all tucked away at home under strict instructions not to go anywhere, Beaky set off on a journey down into the North Pennines and spent a few days around Crossfell eating rabbits, so I'm told. One of the gamekeepers saw her there. So it was really exciting to see that first journey, see the birds exploring. And they're moving, as you might expect, typically into Northumberland as their kind of first port of call, but down the kind of spine of the North Pennines, nipping into Cumbria, Yorkshire Dales, North York Moors, Lancashire, County Durham. The furthest south they've been so far is Nidderdale and the Forest of Bowland. So those are the areas that we anticipate eagles will potentially utilise in the future, which is really exciting. I'm a County Durham girl myself, and most of my family are from Yorkshire. So I'm really, really keen to see golden eagles back in Northern England, and it's an exciting time. So just a few maps here of where the eagles have been moving. This was actually one of our subadult birds that had been up into the Cairngorms and the Angus Glens and then came back down into Northern England. This was the one that went to Forest of Bowland and back up again. So doing some quite interesting movements. This was a bird here that came down again, North Pennines, and then across to the Lake District. We actually had birds find and roost on the nest at Haweswater where golden eagles were maybe kind of 10, 15 years ago in Northern England. So there's something about the topography, the habitat, there's something there that golden eagles see, and they know that it's what they need and what's good for them. So they're going back to those historical spots. It's absolutely phenomenal, the information we've got. We have a raptor worker, Chris Rowley, who's based in Dumfries and Galloway here, and he's been monitoring eagles for probably 40, 50 years now, maybe longer. And some of the trees that eagles are roosting in, or the rocks that they're perching on, Chris has data and information from his notebooks going back kind of generations, and they're going to those same places. It's really, really fascinating to see. So it's really exciting what we could maybe anticipate from this next phase. So again, down into Yorkshire there. I will try and play this video for you. There might be quite a lot of sound here, so I will try and, yeah, here we go. Now, those raptor enthusiasts amongst you might recognise this as the alarm call of a hen harrier. And this is one of our eagles. I got a very excited call from a colleague of mine at Natural England saying, we've got an eagle in a hen harrier nest. She'd landed in the nest and was caught on their nest camera. Now, I can tell you that the chicks were old enough to safely scuttle away, so the hen harriers weren't harmed. They scuttled off into the heather, and this eagle left empty-handed, but really exciting to see. And yeah, a really exciting future. So at the moment, I can't tell you for definite what our next phase is going to be. We know that there is the potential for eagles in Northern England. We know that there's an appetite for eagles in Northern England, but we're going to be working over the next couple of years with Natural England and Forestry England to try and find a way forward. So that might be a full reintroduction somewhere in Northern England. It might be dotting some subadults about in territories as birds start to settle, or it might be merely supporting our eagles as they start to drift down on their own. We don't quite know how quickly that will happen, but we've got a fantastic advisory group of scientists who are helping us kind of make these decisions. So a really, really exciting time. We are actively seeking funding, so if you know of any funders who would like to help us, would like to support us, or if you'd like to donate, please do go to the website and get some more information there. But yeah, thank you so much for listening this evening. I hope I haven't gone on too long, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not quite sure how you could have gone for too long. I could listen to that for hours and hours, but anyway.
Sorry, I rattled through at speed. I was aware I was going over time, but yeah, there's so much to say.
We've still had 140 of the original 150 participants for that. So just absolutely magical. And the illustration of the dedication to actually achieve some of this stuff of traveling big distances, going and collecting birds and getting them back in an aviary the same day. And the ongoing monitoring, feeding. I'll never forget seeing that video of them playing with a plastic tree guard.
It's wonderful, yeah. It's brilliant to be able to share that with, something that people would normally not get to see.
But also thank you. It was difficult viewing, but for sharing the realities and some of the fatalities as well. But also the longevity. There's hope for those of us that are nearly 34 to keep going for a while. We've got 16 questions, so I won't go through all of them, even though we are recording and people can catch up. But forgive us if I don't get to your question, some of you. But I'll try and pick out some of the most pertinent ones. One was about, you talked about the lack of movement out of the southern uplands at the moment and between them and the further north birds. Does that give a genetic diversity concern longer term?
It does. So that was one of the reasons why we were so keen to do the translocation now rather than kind of waiting. As I mentioned, that male that's 34 years old is just an indication of how old those adults of the breeding pairs in the south of Scotland are. So it was really key to try and do something to help that kind of aging population, but also a good boost of genetics into a pool that was likely very, very small. We have got someone looking at the DNA samples that are being taken, but that'll probably be some time before it's sorted. But yeah, it's very, very important just to get that boost. And we're hoping as the population builds in the south that there will be more movement back and forth across the central belt so that it will become kind of one contiguous population.
Thank you. And has bird flu affected golden eagles across Scotland?
It has, not huge numbers, maybe not as high as something like the white-tailed eagle, which eats more birds. There have been a few cases in golden eagles, not a huge number, and we've not seen it in any of our birds as yet. It's a little bit of an unknown, but some of you might know it's, avian flu's been now recorded in things like foxes and otters and all sorts of things. So it is a concern for us. We'll have to wait and see. But, you know, again, bolstering that population in the south will hopefully help, you know, against any kind of you know, freak events like, you know, potentially the avian influenza having an impact on that small and fragmented population. There's few birds could have wiped out in a season, whereas hopefully we'll have a more robust population that can cope with something like that.
Thank you. And I know they take a wide range of prey, and I guess you would have evidence of that from golden eagle studies going way back, not just from the project. Is there any evidence or much evidence of them taking livestock alive?
We've had no substantiated instances of our golden eagles taking any livestock in the south of Scotland at all, which is brilliant. Golden eagles are not that comfortable around people, so they tend to be right up in the kind of upland hills and away from you know, kind of people and particularly lambs when they're small. They are capable of taking a lamb. You know, we can't promise that will never happen, but we know from, you know, landowners all throughout Scotland and the ones that we've been in the south there that it really isn't a problem for golden eagles or for kind of farming, you know, around golden eagles. They're yeah, very few issues.
Thank you. And just sort of thinking about ecological function and the role eagles can play in that. There are lots of waders in some of the Yorkshire Dales, curlew, lapwing, and so on. Do they tend to take them or some of the predators of the waders? What's the evidence around that?
So golden eagles do have a very kind of wide, varied diet. When they can, they prefer lagomorphs. So your rabbits, brown hares, mountain hares are their favourite. I'm not aware of waders even kind of being mentioned on the list of kind of prey items that are found in nests, but they can take things like wood pigeons, foxes, badgers, you know, very occasionally something like a red squirrel, but we're hoping that they're going to take far more greys than reds. So, you know, and we had a golden eagle land in a hen harrier nest. You know, they are an apex predator. They will take other raptor species. We've had, I think, 2 examples of buzzards being seen being captured by golden eagles. So they will have an impact on some things, but the impact that they can have on rebalancing the food web, I think, is going to be more key. So, you know, predating those high numbers of corvids, ravens, foxes, things that may well be problematic to waders, I think in the balance they'll be much kind of beneficial.
Thank you. That certainly backs up what I would say I've seen in the Hebrides of the highest densities of waders, where I've seen the highest densities of eagles. Might not be typical of many parts of the UK, but certainly they can coexist. And is there any suggestion that they kind of do the thing of creating a landscape of fear, even for deer, for fawns particularly? They're moving along and stop intense grazing. They're not quite.
Potentially. I mean, I know that some pairs that we've collected chicks from can specialize in kind of deer calves and fawns at, you know, that time of year. I'm not particularly aware of whether they have an impact on a kind of population level moving you know, animals around. That's probably something that I'm not so aware of, but I can't imagine it's a big influence because I think it would be kind of widely known.
Okay. And conscious of time, just one last one. What can we in Yorkshire and the rest of the north of England do to pave the way for eagles to come south? How can we help?
Oh, absolutely. Firstly, go to the website and donate if you can spare a few pennies. It's really key that we get the funding to continue. But secondly, spreading the word. You know, tell us if you get any sightings of birds. If there's any groups that would like talks, information. We're hoping once we get established to have stuff in place to do more of that engagement work and tell people about golden eagles and their kind of benefits to the ecosystem. So yeah, have a look at the website, get some more information. And my email is there. So if anyone does have questions that haven't been answered, you know, please do get in touch and I'll do my best to answer those.
Well, Kat, thank you for that. We're getting loads of thanks and plaudits in on the chat, which we'll capture and share with you afterwards. I told you I was excited at the start, and I'm just as excited now, if not more. So thanks ever so much for that. Just to conclude, I will bring up a couple of final slides if I can find them. Yeah, thank you. So very happy for Cat, as I said to her before, to talk about the fundraising for the Eagle Project. YRN is also a charity, so I'm not going to spend long on this one because I think I'd prefer the money to go to the Eagles just temporarily before the rest of the YRN trustees shout at me. We've got some upcoming practical volunteering days, the first of which was due to be on Saturday, but both because of snow cover and frozen ground, we're not going to be able to do that at Denton near Oakley on Saturday. So 10 people have booked for that. We'll be in touch about a revised date and publicise it again. But we have got other days coming up in mid-February at Harewood and March over at Bardsey with East Keswick Wildlife Trust. Again, details on our events page on the website. And our next webinar is a provisional date on the 26th of February, talk about the Snazen project by the Woodland Trust. And I look at that top picture, and as they add trees to the landscape and braid the river and so on, I can just picture, because there's not many people around, I can picture golden eagles at the top of that. So I'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for joining us. So the next webinar we're planning to be the 26th of February. We'll start promoting that a month beforehand because we buy the Zoom licenses a month at a time. But thank you all for joining us this evening. I very much trust that you have enjoyed it, and thanks for all the comments and questions. Sorry if we didn't get to your question, but thank you again, Kat, and we'll leave it there.
No problem. Thank you.
I'll just leave the chat for a moment or two to let people put anything they want in there, but I'll disappear.